Arena mode is finally here, and in today's video, I'm going to explain how it works and give you 15 tips to help you succeed in it. So let's get to it. I think the best way to explain how Arena mode works is to go through it in the help pages of the game, and I'll add stuff as I do this. So let's get to that. So here's the main page for Arena mode. I'm going to hit the help right here, and let's go through what it says. Let me scroll down a little bit. The Arena is a non-real-time based battle mode where you face off against defensive teams formed by your opponent in an attempt to destroy their main tower. This is the player versus player battle system in the game. So when it says opponent, it refers to another player. You, by the way, will also set up your own defensive alignment on a map, which we'll get to in a moment. Okay, next we have is creating your team. So it says here, you will need to form and enter a defensive team in order to take part in Arena. Your team stats, formation, and placement are all locked in once, so think carefully to create a winning team. Keep in mind that cost obviously doesn't matter, so you can place all your best pilots at once, and hopefully sometime in the future before this particular season ends, I will go over what I think are the best placements for your Nightmare Frame pilots on the current map. Now back to going over how Arena mode works. Okay, so now we've talked about creating your defensive team. Let's scroll down here. You may enter at any time, however you must enter again every time a new season begins. So what that means is you have to first set up your team, and you can do that anytime during the week. However, you want to do that at the beginning so you have more opportunities to partake in Arena mode. And the reason why it tells you you have to sign up every new season is because a season in this game is a week. So when the week ends, you'll get all your awards for that week and you'll have to set up a new team for the next week. The benefits of this are, let's say you got brand new pilots and you want to use them in your defensive formation, well, you'll be able to in the following week. Or maybe you upgrade your older pilots and you want to use a newer version of them in your defensive formation. Either way, it's pretty good they reset it every single week. Also, like it said, once you select a team, it'll lock and that'll be it. So make sure you pick your team carefully. Okay, let's move on in the help screen. So let's scroll down further. Okay, it says here, actually right here, okay. Deploying and selecting, actually we'll go a little higher. No, that's fine, okay. Deployment and selecting opponents. You can select from 3 opponents from within your league to face off against. Entering the arena will allow you to fight against teams formed by your chosen opponent. You'll have the option to change your team formation each time you deploy. So a couple things to go over that were not mentioned here is that, first of all, there's a mulligan option. You'll notice there's a little circle at the very top. It has like 2 arrows pointing. I think it's like one of these. If you hit that button, it'll swap out the current 3 options and give you 3 new options to pick from. However, you can only use the mulligan for the first round. So you can only mulligan one of the 3 options for your first battle. Once you complete the first battle, you can no longer use the mulligan option. I'm not sure why they did that, but that's how it works. The next thing to discuss is the purple button by the red button. That button allows you to preview the team you might go up against. And that's very important because if you know what you are up against, you can create the appropriate team to take them out. So very important to always hit that purple button before challenging that opponent. The last important note here is that when you are deciding who you want to go up against, pay attention to the battle score by their specific formation. If your battle score is less than the team that you want to compete against, it might not be a good idea to challenge that formation, but hey, you might click on it, see that the formation's not that bad, then in that case, go for it, but always pay attention to that score. That's why it's there. Okay, now let's move on to the flow of battle. So let me go to here. Alright, here we go. The goal of the arena battles is to destroy your opponent's main tower within the time limit. Just like quest battles, deployment points are spent to place short-range nightmare frames on the ground and long-range nightmare frames on the ground. Well, actually on the higher elevated areas, but same difference. In this mode, however, units cannot be placed within a tower's effective range. Destroy sub-towers to open more of the area. So we have the time limit here, the main tower which is your objective, and then the 3 sub-towers. A couple things to note here, just like how there's limitations to where you can deploy the nightmare frames when you are the attacking team, there are also restrictions on where you can place certain pilots for your defensive team. For your defensive team, you can only place Nightmare Frame pilots in any of the sections that are governed by the sub or main tower. You cannot place any pilots in the area that's not, and the game will indicate this when you're putting together your defensive team. Now, another thing to note is that there are 3 sub towers you have to destroy to get to the main tower. There's no set order in which you have to destroy these towers. Generally speaking, defeating them 1 to 3 usually works because that's how they are placed on the battlefield, but there are ways to take them out in any order you like, and one of the strategies in arena mode is to do things like that to help you take out the main tower even faster. The towers will also have certain effects that apply to the pilots that are defending them. It'll vary by map, but they all do have some kind of nice benefits to them. And oftentimes you'll have to destroy the sub tower to get rid of that benefit. This is especially important if the tower is providing every pilot within it a shield. So let's continue discussing how the flow of battle works. Let me go back to here, we'll scroll down. Flow of battle 2 of 3. Units you place will advance automatically, attacking the sub towers 1, 2, then 3, before finally the main tower. Destroying a sub tower will allow you to place units in its area of effect and nullify its buffs, such as shields, and reduce damage to enemy units, making them easier to attack. Which is what I just said earlier, that you want to take out those towers to make it easier to kill those Nightmare Frame pilots. And because destroying a sub tower opens up that area, one of the things you can do is plan for that by having certain pilots in your back pocket ready to deploy in that area once you clear it out with a certain pilot. I'll get to some tips later on, but that's just something to keep in mind. Let's continue on with the flow of battle. Okay, let's go down further. Alright, units may do things such as prioritize the main tower based on their action type. There are some units that are the exception, doing things such as ignoring the sub tower orders. So what it's saying there is that pilots have something called an action type, and you can view this in the same place that you upgrade a given pilot. The action type will vary, of course, like it said, but usually it's based on the pilot type. For example, annihilators tend to be more aggressive, so they'll go right after the tower, versus strategy types which may avoid conflict altogether. So make sure to know which pilots do what before you put together your team. Also, some pilots don't move at all. For example, we don't have him yet, but Bradley, one of the Knights of the Round, he does not move once you deploy him, which is also very important to keep in mind. I should say, generally speaking, if you strategize properly, this factor shouldn't be much of an issue. Now let's continue on going through the flow of battle. So it says here, let's go down a little further. Okay. Clearing a battle will award you points based on how many towers and enemies you destroyed. Even if you can't destroy the main tower, you'll still be awarded points based on how well you did. Fight as hard as you can during the time limit. Points are calculated from the number of towers and enemies you've destroyed, and you can gain a bonus for the number held of times remaining when you destroy the main tower. That was a really weird sentence. It can also vary depending on the points difference between you and your opponent. So let's talk about what all that means. But before I do, one thing it does not state, which is really important to note: if any pilot on your attacking team is destroyed during the battle, you cannot use them for the rest of that battle. So be very careful when deploying and withdrawing pilots, because if you lose them for the rest of the battle. Now the rest of this talks about how the score works, and the score is really important because it determines if you rank up or if you keep your current rank and how many medals you're going to get. Now it says you should keep fighting until the time runs out, and what that simply means is that even if the time runs out, and let's say you took out a couple of Nightmare Frame pilots, maybe a couple sub towers, you will still get a score by the end. So it's very important to finish the battle, even if it's not going well, just to get something. The only thing I'll add to how the score is calculated, while it says it's based on how many enemies you've destroyed, the difficulty of those enemies, how fast you did it, and how many towers you took out, there seems to be other factors as well, maybe how much damage you dealt or other considerations. That's why it even says, if I'm not mistaken, it also can vary depending on the points difference between you and your opponent, and I'm sure there's other factors like that. So if you're playing through arena mode and you get a score you're confused about, well, don't worry about it. I still don't fully understand how it works. I've defeated really powerful opponents, killed all their Nightmare Frames, defeated all the towers very quickly, and got a mediocre score score, and I've taken down weak opponents with very few nightmare frames deployed, took out the towers very fast and got a high score as well. So I don't know. You would think that if you take out the strongest opponents in the fastest time, you'd get a high score, but that's not always the case, and I have no idea why that is. In this respect, arena mode can be quite a pain in the ass. Okay, let's now talk about the League Awards and how you move up in rank. So here we are, League rank and awards. Let me go down, or rewards, sorry. Okay, a season runs from Sunday to Saturday. Points gained during the season affect your league rank and allow you to get rewards. Try building a strong team so you can earn lots of points, improve your league rank, and collect many rewards. When the season changes, you can move to the arena menu to collect awards, or rewards, sorry. A couple things to note. When you move up in rank, you will get a new map that you have to defend from attacking players. That's another reason why it resets every single week, because you might have to set up a new formation on a new map. Another thing to note, it's not entirely clear how many points you need to move up in rank or maintain the rank. I always figured it was 2,000, but I've seen people get by with less. So my advice here is to just complete as many battles as you can, get the highest score possible, and don't leave it up to chance. But it is kind of frustrating that they're not very clear on how that works. The next thing to note is that as you get higher in rank, you'll get access to better items in the arena mode store. For example, in the Japanese version, you can buy Nightmare Frame upgrade cubes, which is really helpful. Eventually, there will also be costumes that you can purchase with your arena mode medals in a separate store. While I do like some of the stuff you can buy from the store, it is frustrating that you don't actually get Sakuradite from completing these missions, which was the opposite of Janissary Code, which did give you some. So even though I hated that game, at least it actually gave you Sakuradite to summon characters when you completed their arena mode. So I don't know why this game doesn't do that. It's kind of frustrating, and there's one particular user who might be watching this who really hates it. Okay, now that I've gone over how arena mode works, here's my 15 tips for you to succeed in arena mode. Starting with tip 15, which is how you should prioritize what to buy in the store. So my advice would be just get the Nightmare Frame upgrade items. Don't worry too much about the gold. Don't worry too much about the training mode upgrade items. In my experience, those are not that helpful. Training mode is fine the way it is, and you're gonna find that later on, those Nightmare Frame upgrade items are way more important than anything you could purchase to make training mode better. Okay, tip number 14, construct a team that can handle potential problems. Arena mode can get kind of crazy at times, and it's very possible you could lose your main attacker, cost increaser, healer, whatever. So make sure your team can anticipate these problems and have alternative solutions. For example, maybe you have 2 annihilators on your team, maybe you have multiple cost increasers, and things like that. Because if you lose your main attacker and you have nobody else, you lost the mission. And that happens to me all the time. So make sure you have a backup plan in case something stupid happens, because arena mode can go really fast and you don't want to be in a situation where you lost your best pilots and now you're just watching the timer go down to 0 and you cannot do anything. So think really hard about the team you want to deploy onto the battlefield. Tip 13 also relates to your attacking team. Make sure to use pilots that will buff your pilots to help them defeat the opposing Nightmare Frames. This can be D-Tart to cloak them, C2 to give them barriers, maybe you have something like Lelouch to get more blocks, or Kage to reduce the damage. Whatever the case may be, just don't have your pilots go out there by themselves. It's very important to protect them with other pilots. It's a team effort, so make sure everyone works together as a team. An obvious but important tip. My number 12 tip is to save your strongest attackers for the main tower. So as you know, as you destroy different towers, the different sub-towers rather, you'll open up more spots to place Nightmare Frame pilots. But I would recommend not putting out your strongest attackers until you've destroyed the 3rd sub-tower for several reasons. Starting with, if your best attacker is out on the battlefield early on, that means it's easier for them to get killed versus putting them out towards the end. The next thing is, the pilots actually have to move to take out the main tower. So what's faster in your opinion? Putting the pilots out at the beginning and having them have to travel all the way to the main tower, or waiting until the main tower is unlocked and putting your pilot right next to it? I think we know the answer to that question. Moving Moving on from your best attackers, my tip for number 11 is to use tanks like Colin, Toto, or the new Colin on your defensive and your attacking teams. Both are very important because on your defensive team, it can delay your opponent, possibly even making them run out of time, which is really important. And for your attacking teams, having a defensive pilot early on can help you take out the sub towers without them getting killed. Colin especially is really useful here because of her immortality ability, but even the new Colin or Toto can help out as well. But the reason why the first Colin is the best here is because she has a really strong combination of attack and defense, and her immortality ability really comes into play. In the future, there will be other pilots with similar abilities, and you want to use those as your main attackers for taking out the enemy's sub towers, and of course the main tower. My next tip at number 10 is to use pilots with fast redeployment time on your attacking team. Doing this gives you several benefits. You can buff your pilots while debuffing the enemy Nightmare Frame pilots. You can have them go around the battlefield as you open more areas by destroying the sub towers, and it's just the most efficient way to do things given the fact that you have a time limit. And some of the best pilots are ones with fast redeployment time, so it's very important to utilize these type of pilots on your attacking team. Number 9 is more of a general tip, but pay attention to what's going on. It can get very easy to get distracted while you're playing through the mode, so just pay attention to what's happening. It's very easy if you don't to lose your Nightmare Frame pilots, and as I said earlier, if they die, they die.
If he dies, he dies.
So don't be foolish here. A couple things to add to this: sometimes the opponent will have a Nightmare Frame pilot with a long-range Nightmare Frame weapon. In this case, it'll be Dalton's Gloucester, but there will be other weapons in the future. You want to make sure your pilot doesn't get in front of that during the battle. If you don't pay attention to this, you can lose your pilots very quickly. And if you are in a situation like that, you have to quickly withdraw your pilot from the battle. There's all kinds of stuff like this that you can get blindsided by, so just pay attention to what's going on. My number 8 tip is about lances. Definitely use those if you have them. They're really useful because you attack from a distance, both the enemy pilots and of course the sub towers. In many respects, you can even take out some early on because of this. Cornelia is one of the best in this respect, so if you got lances, make sure to use those. My tip for number 7 relates to what I said earlier about the store, but make sure to maintain your A rank to get all the best items in the store. It's very important, especially if you want those Nightmare Frame upgrade items. My tip for number 6 relates to how to come up with a good defensive formation for a given map. Now obviously, since you know how arena mode works, you can kind of plan out where you think certain pilots should go. But a cool hack is to play against other players, and let's say you get messed up by one of them, you can study what they did and copy it for your next formation. I do this all the time and it helps out tremendously. At tip number 5 is for both defending and attacking formations, but really defending is where this comes into play, which is having lots of healers, because if you have lots of healers on your team, you can heal obviously your defensive pilots or whoever you're trying to use to block the enemy Nightmare Frames. So healers can definitely be annoying for opposing attacking teams to deal with. They can also be useful for your attacking teams, especially if you're in a situation where you're in a standstill and you have to keep your pilot healed, maybe because Colin's immortality is activated and you cannot take her out in one shot, so you have to kind of sit there and wait for it to end. Or maybe later on you have the Gawain, which requires 3,000 health to activate its special. Well, in that case, a healer could come into play to make that effect more alive during the battle. Oh, and one quick bonus tip: if you stun Colin with, let's say, Lelouch, well, it would be actually Lelouch, she won't activate her immortality ability, allowing you to one-shot her. If you use a Nightmare Frame skill on Colin before she activates her immortality ability, that'll also one-shot her. Trust me, those tips will really come into play. Now moving on to tip number 4, which again relates to your defensive formation. Obviously use Detard and C2 and eventually Halloween Lelouch as well, because if you can cloak your units or give them barriers or whatever buffs you can add, will just make it even harder for the attacking teams to take them out. At tip number 3 is to make a team dedicated to arena mode, specifically attacking. You don't have to worry about the defensive formation. Doing this will save you time in the long run. As I've said ad nauseum at this point, making teams dedicated for specific situations will save you time in the long run. And of course, make sure you label it as arena so you can find it really easily. Moving on to tip number 2. make sure you complete all 3 battles. What might happen is you might accidentally click out, or you might think, well, I'm losing, I might as well leave the mission, or maybe you have an internet connection problem, I don't know. But whatever the case may be, you only get 3 shots in arena mode. It doesn't matter how you get disconnected from the current mission, but if you do, that's it, you lost your battle. You'll have to go back to the main screen and challenge one of those missions again. The game does not give you a mulligan for a battle that you missed, so it's very important that when you're playing each battle, you finish it towards the end. If you quit out, you don't get any points either, which is a real pain in the ass. This, in my mind, it might be the worst part of arena mode. And my number 1 tip, which might be the most obvious but is super important, make sure you challenge arena mode every single day. Doing this will increase your chances of going up in rank, getting the most medals, and buying the items that you want. And if you don't play every single day, then every other tip I just mentioned is irrelevant. There you go, that's how arena mode works and my top tips for completing it. If you want even more tips, I have my top 10 tips for beginners, and I also have a comprehensive beginner guide to the game. Go check those out right now.